Hello, everybody. Today it is my honor to be able to welcome a guest that I was so happily surprised said yes to being on my show as a brand new show when my producer asked me to make a list of dream guests. His name was one of the very first on my list. And so I am so excited to welcome you, Leon. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I want to tell you a little bit about how I found you, actually, and it relates to this whole topic that we're here on for the show, spirituality for skeptics. So I've worked with a spiritual guide and mentor consistently, the same one since about 2021, and she actually recommended your documentary to me. And after watching that, then I decided to go back and get into your book, The Kindness Diaries. So I feel like I've just kind of been immersed. And I think the thing that really drew me to you is that, you know, I have my personal core values, and two of my top four are kindness and generosity. And I think, again, that's really why I felt that pull and that draw to, you know, follow up with more of your work. And of course, to have you here. And no one exemplifies those amazing qualities, I think, more than you. And yeah, that's why I am so excited to have you here.
Well, there's no pressure after that opening, so let's see what happens.
No, I think it's going to be great. So this show is really about storytelling to a large extent, right? And I know that you've done a ton of that in your book, The Kindness Diaries, which is also a TV show, in your documentary, A Kindness Within. And so people can hear a lot of your story, but I want to kind of take it through a little bit of a different angle and different lens. So I'd first like to start by just asking, you know, how would you describe the work that you've done and the work that you do?
Wow. I've had hundreds of interviews and no one's ever asked me that question.
Perfect.
So how would I describe the work that I've done and the work that I do? So I would say that the work that I've done and the work that I do is kind of the same. It's all the same thing. It has two parts to it. One is a self-healing journey. So you'll notice that a lot of the stuff I do is adventure travel, is about connecting with people. And the other thing that it is about helping other people, hopefully, to heal themselves too. So my work is not a selfless act. It helps me immeasurably. And a byproduct of that, I hope, is to help other people. I don't know if that made sense, but that's kind of how I see it.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, again, if people want to have a lot of context about what that looks like, we're going to get into some of it, but highly recommend reading your book, watching the TV series, watching the documentary. But I'd love to get into some background because I know this isn't what you've always done. So can you give us maybe some background context for how you found yourself making these shifts, like even maybe going a little bit back to growing up and the career that you had before going on these amazing adventures?
Sure. So as a kid, I felt very alone. At school, I felt alone. At home, I felt alone. And I thought that the answer to that was to make as much money as possible, as many of us do. And I became a broker in the city of London. And on the outside, I had everything you could ever want. But again, on the inside, I had nothing you would ever want. But no one knew because I was wearing a mask, a psychological mask that said to the world, oh, I'm okay. But I wasn't. And I think many of us can relate to that. And I stumbled across the movie, The Motorcycle Diaries, which is a romanticized version of Che Guevara traveling around South America, relying on kindness. And believe it or not, after watching that movie, I decided to quit my job and to start traveling around the world, relying on kindness. I hitchhiked from Times Square to the Hollywood sign. I hitchhiked from the Eiffel Tower to Red Square in Moscow. I got a vintage taxi and I drove it from New York to Los Angeles, giving free cab rides to people. I did all these crazy things. I settled in Los Angeles and kind of ended up on some level going back to the old ways. And then I had another, I don't know if this is a word, but an epiphanous moment. Maybe it isn't a word, but whatever. I had another epiphanous moment, right? And I was walking down Hollywood Boulevard and I saw a homeless guy with a sign that said, "Kindness is the best medicine." And there was something about that was like, oh my goodness, I've gone back to my old ways. I have to quit my job again. So I did. I quit my job again. And this time I purchased a vintage yellow motorcycle with a sidecar, and I drove it from Los Angeles all the way around the world back to Los Angeles. I had no money, no food, no gas, no place to stay. All I had was relying on people like you and people like your listeners. You couldn't give me money, just generosity. And that took me on a 6-7 year journey where I also went from Alaska to Argentina in a 50-year-old Beetle. And I had all these amazing moments. And again, I thought I'd arrived. I was on Netflix. I was speaking in stadiums. I was on some of the best TV shows. I was, in the New York Times and all this kind of stuff. But I found myself in my house up in the Hollywood Hills writing a suicide note. I had received what I thought would fix me again. And it didn't fix me. And at that moment, I made the decision to call my therapist. And fortunately, it was very late at night. He picked the phone up. He calmed me down. The next morning, I went to a bookshop and I randomly saw a book by Paramahansa Yogananda, The Autobiography of a Yogi. I take the book. This is all random. Opened it, looked at a random paragraph, started to read it. And in that paragraph, his soon-to-be guru says to him, "If you reveal God to me, I will follow you anywhere." Now, I'm not a religious man, but there was something about that line. So I had another epiphanous moment, and I decided to go to India to find God. And I wasn't going to leave until God was revealed to me, not the God that lives up in the sky with a beard, the universal energy of love, source.
Yes.
And that's the movie, The Kindness Within. And that's 20 years in 2 minutes.
Yeah. I know. I feel very familiar with all of this because I have, seen and read so much, but I really, feel so many different points of connection to you. I know we don't really know each other, but I have that same experience of having all of the external success. And while I wasn't necessarily depressed and, wasn't considering suicide, I had built a big online coaching business. We were making millions of dollars every single year. I could do what I want when I wanted to. And I found myself sleepless, anxious, and loving what I was doing, loving my team, loving our clients, but also really feeling this pull towards something more. And I think my venture into seeking God, seeking spirit was much more subtle than yours. And I, didn't go on any, kind of wild journeys. But I still very much resonate with that. And I think that there are people who can be completely fulfilled by, I don't know, having all the money and all of the things. But yeah, I just have to say, I so resonate with what you've done. And I think it's really beautiful. So you weren't raised with any type of like religious or spiritual framework at all.
We used to go, it's interesting. That's a great question. Mm-hmm. So we used to go to church every Sunday. And as a kid, I would go to church and everyone was nice to each other. I was like, this is interesting. And then they'd leave church and they'd all be mean to each other. And then they'd go back to church and all be nice to each other. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I just don't understand what's going on. Right. And I think that's part of why I never went down the religious route. There was something, this was just my experience, where it just felt disingenuous to me. Mm-hmm. If you're going to be kind to someone when you're in church, why are you going to be unkind to them when you're at home? Right?
Yeah.
It just didn't make sense to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, when you set out to do the whole process of the Kindness Diaries, what was your belief system like at that time in terms of
the Kindness Diaries is the motorbike trip around the world. Mm-hmm. And I want to make something clear. You don't have to fix your life by doing something extreme like that.
Right.
You don't have to fix your life by getting a yellow motorbike, quitting your job and going around the world. You don't have to fix your life by going to India to find God, right? You said something, you use an interesting word, that your spiritual moments were subtle. Mm-hmm. And That's a really important point. You don't have to do these big things. I did them because I'm a TV producer. This is what I do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted people to be impacted by what I did. So I had to do something big for them to want to watch it. You know what? I had done a lot of reading. I had done a lot of traveling. I had done a lot of kind of going inside, but I still had a long, long, long way to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think going on these adventures was my way to connect with people, was my way to be inspired by nature, be inspired by humanity, connect with my own spirituality, connect with their spirituality. So it was a step on the ladder of finding that pure connection, which I've always been seeking.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose, we never completely stop climbing that ladder, right? As we're on that pursuit. One thing that really stood out to me when I was reading the Kindness Diaries was this kind of theme of trust. I think, it's very practical in the way that I'll ask you, but trust for me has been a huge part of my spiritual growth in terms of self-trust, intuitive trust, guidance from spirit and that kind of thing. But you definitely had to lean into trust. So, for people who haven't read it or watched, you are, as you said, relying on the kindness of strangers to feed you, house you, give you gas for your motorbike. And you found yourself in a lot of precarious moments, I'm sure far more than you were able to include just in the book. And so, but you kept going. So how were you able to sustain trust through all of those challenges and rejections on that journey?
Okay, so that's another great question. So when you talk about trust and how to trust people
Mm-hmm.
or situations, I go with my intuition. And I'm going to tell you a story. So you're going to know this story. And those of you who've watched the show or read the book will know this story. So I was in Pittsburgh and I would go up to people and I would say, "Can I stay in your house tonight?" And they'd say no. But some of them, we'd have a conversation, right? So I was having a conversation with this guy I met in the park. And I said, my spiel, "Can I stay in your house tonight?" And he looks at me and he goes, "Oh, you know what? I'm really sorry, but I'm homeless. I'd been told that this park I was going in was a little bit dangerous and that I shouldn't go to this park." But I was like, it's day, I'll be fine. So I asked this guy if I could stay in his house. He says he's homeless. I'm like, I've just asked a homeless man to stay in his house. I felt a little bit of shame. I said, "Oh, okay, I'm really sorry." But then he goes, "You know what? Hold on. If you want, you can stay with me tonight. I will feed you. I will protect you. And I will give you some clothes." And remember that the film crew did not stay with me, right? So they went into a hotel and I had to do whatever I had to do. There was a part of me that said to me, "Leon, you are not staying on the streets of Pittsburgh tonight." But there was a counterintuitive voice, my intuition, that was saying, "Leon, my good friend, you are staying on the streets of Pittsburgh tonight." My intuition told me that this guy would do what he said he would do. I felt his heart. I felt his compassion. I felt his kindness. So I said yes. And I ended up sleeping on the streets of Pittsburgh. The crew left around 11 o'clock at night and they came home. They came back to it was my home for the night. They came 8 hours later. An amazing moment. A couple of days later, actually not a couple of days later, a couple of days before, I was in Chicago and a homeless guy and me started chatting and he said something similar, but I didn't feel, my intuition said to me, "No, you are not doing it." And I didn't do it. So all of my travels, all of my connections with humanity, good and bad, have taught me whether to turn left or to turn right. I listen to the voice inside. Generally, I'm not perfect, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I listened to the voice inside.
And how do you, this is actually a topic that's come up in a lot of the conversations I've been having. How do you distinguish what is intuition for you personally versus thought, brain, ego, instinct?
It's a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Like the feeling with the homeless guy in Pittsburgh was I felt I would be okay. The feeling with the homeless guy in Chicago was I'm not going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. Did you have to, is that something you kind of have to look for, or does it just come out naturally? Or are you like, okay, I have to quiet my mind, let me like tune into myself, or you just kind of have this knowing
Look,
through the feeling?
look, I would say that for me, it's been a practice.
Hmm.
I've done a lot of meditation. I've done a lot of solo travel. I've done a lot of adventures. I've connected with a lot of people. I've made a lot of mistakes.
Hmm.
So I remember once I was in Thailand. This is the time when I didn't listen to my intuition. And I was with a friend and we were outside a place, and a guy comes with a tuk-tuk and says, I'll take you to the nearest club. And I said to my friend, there's something not right about this guy. He's like, no, everything's fine. I said to my friend, man, there's something not right about this guy. He's like, no, everything's fine. I was like, okay. I was 21 years old. So we got into the tuk-tuk, and the guy ended up taking us to an opium den. We didn't want to go to an opium den. This guy was a very dodgy character, right? So we got out and we left. But that was a moment of realization that my intuition had said, do not get into the tuk-tuk. And I didn't listen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting point. I've also traveled all over the world, and most of it solo as well, as a woman. And it's making me think, I've ended up in really no scenarios, except for maybe one when I was in my 20s, that felt unsafe. It's really, really interesting, because I mean, at every moment, especially when you're traveling, you have a choice. Do I go right or do I go left? And yeah, it's just a really interesting thought. I was having a conversation with someone else just about, feeling like I can intuitively, well, if I think about my own intuition, right, I can say, okay, I've created all this success. I've made a lot of the right decisions when I was at those crossroads. I made a lot of the right choices. But for me, it's like when I'm looking for it or trying to find it or listen to it, that's when it seems to be really quiet. And I can only kind of recognize it in hindsight. So it's definitely, I think, for people listening, going to be, a bit of a point of contention for them as well. So I always like hearing people's perspectives on how they're tuning in and hearing it for themselves. So during these journeys, whether it's the Kindness Diaries or when you went to India during your own personal journey, were there any moments that you were just like, and you talk about some in the book, but like any just big moments where you're like, yeah, I'm done? And what made you ultimately decide to see things through?
I'm going to tell you a story that's actually not in the movie.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, I got on a plane and I went to India. And I said to myself, I wasn't going to leave until I found God. Okay.
Mhm.
Obviously, I realized at the end of the trip that I didn't need to go to India to find God. Okay.
Mhm.
But I needed to go to India to find God. Right.
Yes.
So on day 2 of being in India, I'm in Rishikesh and I'm having what I would describe politely as a minor meltdown. Right. And I'm like, I can't do this anymore. So I'm on my way to my director's bedroom in the hotel to tell him that I'm going home. Okay. I'm literally on my way to the director's bedroom to tell him I'm going home. And as I'm on my way, I see this door that's open. And I'm like, all right. I walk through the door and it's a library. I'm like, okay, I like libraries. So I look around. It's not a very good library, but it's a library. And I find a book called The Divine Romance by Paramahansa Yogananda, the author of the book that got me to India. And the book, The Divine Romance, is all about finding God.
Wow.
And in that moment, I was like, I can't go home. I mean, there's absolutely no way I'm going to go home.
Wow.
So instead, I go to my director's bedroom. I tell him about this amazing moment, and we try and recreate it so we can put it in the movie, but it doesn't work because it wasn't real.
Yeah.
And it never appears in the movie because of that. But that was such a profound moment that changed everything. I mean, you can call it coincidence. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, what are the odds that I walk into a room, a library, the moment I'm about to tell my director I'm going home, and Yogananda's book is there, and it's all about finding God.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, this is an interesting question. Was there any moment, especially, with the first book and the first quote that you shared, when you decided to go to India, was there any part of you that wanted, like, I don't know, the skeptical part of you that wanted to rationalize it away or just be like, oh, like coincidence? Or were you always just like, this is the guidance I'm looking for?
So the moment I read the quote,
Mm-hmm.
it was an epiphany and I was going to India. However, leading up to going to India, of course, there were many, many moments where I was like, what? You just read a quote from a book. Like, why are you doing this to yourself? What happened? You're getting all of your team ready to go to India to film this documentary. You've said you're never going to leave. What happens if you don't find God?
Yeah.
Literally. Like, what happens if people watch this movie and you've told them you're going to find God, and at the end you're like, well, sorry guys, I didn't find God. Thank you and good luck. So the amount of pressure that I put on myself was just crazy.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that, let's say these kind of synchronicities, I don't know, 10 years, 20 years before they actually happened, let's say you read the same book, the same quote, would you have responded the same way and been like, okay, I need to go to India to find God? Or would you have just been like, okay, that's a nice sentence?
Do you know what? It happened the day after I had written that note.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was just in that, it was the perfect moment.
Mm-hmm.
I used to love going into that bookstore. I don't know if you've been to Los Angeles. It's on Abbot Kinney. It used to be on Abbot Kinney, the Mystic Bookshop. I would go there and just sit there for hours. I had been in that bookshop hundreds of times. I had seen that book hundreds of times, and I had never picked it up. Never.
Mm. Yeah.
So I don't know.
So are you the kind of person who, prior to all of this, used to write off coincidences and things like that, and now you pay more attention to it? Like, I guess, how has your interaction with those synchronicities or these kind of, I don't know, divine interventions, how has that evolved through the work that you've done?
Look, when you have let's call it a divine intervention,
Mm-hmm.
when I picked up the book in the Indian library, you can't, but it's impossible. If you turn around and say that means nothing, then you're asleep.
Yeah.
Right. So those kind of moments are so profound that they go through our defense mechanisms.
Yeah.
There may be other smaller moments where you want something so badly, but you keep on getting small messages that it's not the thing for you. But you're like, no, I want this and I'm not stopping until I get it.
Yeah.
So you don't listen or see or hear or feel the messages that are guiding you somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's so interesting, right? And again, this is called Spirituality for Skeptics. And my goal is never to convince anyone of anything. I created this really for people like me who believe way more than not, but still have a lot of those kind of questions, right? And so I think that part of what we're sharing here is seeing someone who, was not religiously raised and you didn't have any particular incentive to like go follow these signs, but you saw enough of these coincidences and you trusted them anyway. So I just feel like that's an important thing to highlight for people who are like, discarding maybe signs and things like that that are coming through for them.
Yes. So a wise man once said to me that our inner voice, God, whatever you want to call it, speaks in whispers.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be silent in order to hear it.
Yes. Yeah. And, it's one of those things, I think, spirituality, awakening, whatever it is, it's what we talked about before. For me, it's been so subtle. And I think it would be so much easier for people like me and many others to, say we're 100% in belief if it was something that just more hit you over the head, which I guess happens for some people, but I would argue more often than not, it's kind of that lifelong journey and quest and these subtle little things ultimately adding up and shifting your belief over time. But it sounds like you kind of had a bit of a crash course in the journeys that you chose to take.
I've definitely had a crash course.
Yes, I love that. So, At any point during these journeys that you've been on, did skepticism come up for you? Were you ever like, did I misinterpret this? Oh, am I supposed to go? I'm going this way, but am I supposed to be going this way? Or were you just like, you know what? Here's the plan. I trust it the whole way.
So I have an interesting quirk of my personality. Once I decide to do something, I will never stop until it's done.
Okay.
So, with the Kindness Diaries, the circumnavigation of the world, that's madness.
Yes.
I mean, sorry, but it is, right? Like another story that wasn't in the book is that we were sitting in the office kind of planning what we were going to do. And we got to, the bike has a passport called the carnet, right? And we realized that the carnet wasn't accepted in Thailand, wasn't accepted in Cambodia, and wasn't accepted in Vietnam. This was when we were in Los Angeles. And I looked at the guys and I said, we will deal with that when we get to Thailand, right? So we arrive in Thailand and they're like, we're so sorry, but the bike can't come in. And we were like, we knew this was going to happen in our heads.
Right.
But we kept on going and we managed, you read some of this in the book. We managed to get the bike through Thailand. We managed to get the bike through Cambodia. We managed to get the bike into Vietnam. Now, you can say this is faith, right? Or you can say it's just a never, never give up attitude, or a bit of both.
Yeah.
But I had faith that we would be able to circumnavigate the world. I also had faith that I would find God. Now, who knows? It could have been wrong, but it wasn't. It was right.
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely, I just think about, I was thinking about when I was reading your book, sometimes I just took my mom to Italy and, we just came back a couple of weeks ago and it was such a long trip back, like on an airplane in a seat, and I just was thinking about how long some of your days must have been, particularly when you were like waiting around the borders and things like that. So I would definitely say that is next level perseverance for sure.
It is definitely perseverance. And also, I say, and because you've traveled a lot, you'll know this to be true, that travel is the school of life.
Yes, absolutely.
So I have learnt so much by being on the road, much more than I learnt ever from sitting in a classroom. The world is my classroom, as it is anyone's classroom who travels.
Yeah, absolutely. And something you definitely don't know about me. I obviously I'm not using it in the way that you would have intended, but I went for my master's degree many years ago in Holocaust and genocide studies. So I was in Cambodia, similar to you. I was at the killing fields. I was in the Tuol Genocide Museum in Phnom Penh. I've been through the concentration camps in Europe. I've been to Sierra Leone doing volunteer work there. So I 100% agree with you. There is nothing that teaches you about the world, about what it is to be human. As I would say, especially when you're visiting places like that really challenge what we know as normal, for sure. Places in South America as well, as you went through there. So yeah, it's incredibly impactful. And I think it's very cool that you were able to take that lens and let other people see how people live, because if you don't seek it, right, you don't know how someone living in the jungle of Cambodia, struggling and not having water or whatever, like we don't know how other people live unless we really seek it. Everything that you described seeing in India, super, super, super impactful in so many ways. And so, when so kind of toward the end of your documentary, you talk about the moment that God was revealed after serving in that very large kitchen. Can you explain a little bit why there? Why was that kind of the moment that you overcame your skepticism, questions, doubt, etc.?
Sure. So we just gave away the whole movie, but it's fine.
Sorry, we can cut
no
that part
worries.
if you want.
No, it's all good. So when I was in the kitchen in Amritsar at the Golden Temple, it's a place where they serve 100,000 meals a day. 100,000 meals a day. And I had traveled all over India, and I'd had small little moments of God, small little moments of love, small little moments of awakening. And I think I had been marinating in love, and I was finally cooked, let's say, when I was at this temple, because there was so much love. Love was everywhere. And I realized that at the core of our humanity, at the core of everything, is love. That doesn't mean there isn't hate.
Right.
There is much hate. But at the core, even in the hate, beyond that, in that is love. And when I was at that kitchen, it all somatically in my heart made sense. And that moment has never left me. Am I able to live like that all the time? Unfortunately, I'm not. I could sit here and say to you, oh, yes, I've become enlightened like a true guru, right? No, I've had those moments. And that was one of the most profound moments. And when you have that type of moment, you can never forget it.
Yeah.
It takes you to a place beyond the mind. It takes you to a place of such profound beauty that everything makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm sure, I don't know you, but I am sure that on your travels, you have had a moment like that.
I have. And actually, and I'll share what it was, and I'll preface it by saying this. I think a big part of the reason that I have struggled with the skepticism piece of this so much is just seeing how unfair the world is and how much pain people are in, while I have, compared to so much of what I've seen, I've had life relatively easy. I've received my own answers looking for some type of answer for this. And I think I have an idea, it's something I can say to myself to reconcile. I believe, our souls are on a journey and we all experience everything. But you did say in the Kindness Diaries, I think you were talking to someone in Sarajevo, you said where there's suffering, there's also always love. And I had an experience when I was volunteering in Sierra Leone. It was, I went with a one-woman charity. She was kind of someone I supported during all my years in business. And I went with her and we were doing this mission. I don't know how much you know about the war there, but it was absolutely horrific. Really the blood diamond victims. Those were the people who suffered and forced amputations and all kinds of horrific chaos. And so we were there and we were mostly helping the children of blood diamond victims get their school uniforms, their books, get ready for the school year, because that's kind of the one hope that they have. And I heard about this camp of women who had all been rape victims by the rebels, and just, again, horrific things happened to them. And so there were probably about 50 of them. And, one story was worse than the last. It was the things that you can't imagine until someone tells you it actually happened to them. We had a woman join us late. She was just in tears. Her baby had just died a few minutes earlier, and she still came to get her donation. And one of the most powerful moments of my life was giving all of these women, a small donation compared to what we have here. And they sang to me and they presented me with this gift. They had knitted together this very long runner. It's in the colors of the flag of Sierra Leone. And they were just in praise and in thanks. And I mean, it was very hard for me to actually receive that, because it just, I don't know, I couldn't imagine being in their shoes, but it was one of those moments similar to what you got to witness, I think, for sure. One I'll never forget.
Yeah, it takes over your entire being. And it is a moment that stays in your cells. Or maybe I should say your cells are awakened in that moment and you never forget it.
Yeah. And I guess for you, having those experiences has made you want to continue doing that good. Because one thing that we haven't said is that, throughout this journey, you were receiving this kindness from people, but you also were really surprising people with things that were life-changing, monetarily, a home, supplies and that kind of thing, which to me is what this whole life is all about, is doing that beautiful work and giving to others.
Absolutely. We at the end of each episode, we gave an unsuspecting Good Samaritan a life-changing gift. For
Hmm.
example, the homeless guy, we ended up putting him up in an apartment
Hmm.
and sending him back to school.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful thing. And they had no idea it was coming, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so good. So you go through all of these experiences, you find God, right? You go on that whole journey, and you did already mention, we waver in how we live, because I think we're humans and we live in the United States, and part of that is what it is. When it comes to your belief in God, or whatever it is that you've been seeking, do you feel like you have really sustained that? Do you go through any doubt or skepticism when you see things that are happening in the world, or anything at all? I'd love to know just kind of what your what your belief structure is like at this time.
I completed all these journeys.
Hmm.
I completed the Kindness Within, A Journey to Freedom. And I found God.
Hmm.
Now, again, there's no perfection for this individual. There are times when I feel far away from God, right? There are times when I feel far away from love. There are times when I feel far away from my cells awakening, as we explained earlier. But then there are moments when it all comes back.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay. So it's actually just your mind trying to cause you pain for whatever reason. It's not, the reality is always what the reality is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just that I forget, and I have to keep remembering. And the way I try to keep remembering is I go into nature. I meditate. I go for walks. I don't watch horrific news, even though sometimes I do. And when I do, I feel bad.
Hmm.
Tell you a little story. I was watching YouTube a couple of weeks ago, and I turned it on, and I spent 45 minutes going down a dark rabbit hole of news, terrible news.
Hmm.
And I felt awful.
Hmm.
And then I was like, what are you doing? So I switched it to some chanting Indian music for an hour and a half. And within 20 minutes, I was like, oh my God, okay, I get it. Everything is fine. It's all okay. Right? So we have to choose sometimes, and sometimes we choose badly, how we want to feel, how we want to be, what we want to do, whether we want to stay connected. And it sometimes becomes a choice. It's always a choice, but sometimes unconsciously we make the wrong choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I try to be conscious of that stuff as well. But yeah, I mean, you live in the US like I do, even though you're not from here. It definitely, the climate here right now is certainly tense. And I do my best I live in the mountains of North Carolina, to be in nature almost every day if possible. And just, do the good that I can do, work on myself, and try to give back. And I think that's the best that we can do. Because I think a lot of people, when, it certainly was true for me, when I would think of, spiritual people, I'd think of people that had a 3-hour meditation in the morning and they were just always relaxed and calm. But I think you're giving a really realistic glimpse into what spirituality looks like for the average person, even one who is very spiritual.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing. However spiritual you think you are, it doesn't mean. I read somewhere that if you think you're spiritual, see how long that lasts when you go to have Thanksgiving dinner with your family.
Yeah, right.
Right? Okay. I don't remember where I read that, but it's a process. It's not easy. It's a process. And if anyone says, "Oh, I am connected all the time, and all I do is think about fluffy clouds, and internally I am so magnificent." Okay, great. All right. It's probably not true, but
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Well, kind of a big, almost final question that I have for you is, and this is a big one. Maybe what is one thing in terms of spirituality that you want people to know after doing your work and going on the incredible journeys that you've been on?
I would say that ultimately it is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
It is a choice what we put into our bodies, whether that's food, whether that's news, the people we surround ourselves with. It's a choice. If you are clean and you jump into a swamp, you will no longer be clean.
Hmm.
So you get to choose what you put into your body, what you put into your mind, what you put into your heart. And I would say, and this is really me talking to myself, to be a little bit less judgmental.
Hmm.
Oh, I went on all these trips and I'm still doing this. Or I went to a yogi and spent 7 days not speaking, and I come home and I'm still watching the news and making myself feel terrible. It's okay. A wise man once said to me that the secret of life, the secret to life, is to be gentle to ourselves. And I think that was a really beautiful and profound words of wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely. And, kind of to an extent, what you did within your documentary as well. You were doing all this good in the world, and, maybe being kind to ourselves is equally as important. So I love that sentiment. And, as we kind of close, of course, if there's anything else you want to share, I'm happy for it. But I do want to say, that your work has been really impactful on me. I've always been generous. I've given a lot. I'm very proud of that. But it's really inspired me, because one of the things that I loved about going to Africa and doing the work with the charity that I did work with is that it was one person running it. It wasn't this like whole bureaucracy. So I was really able to pick and choose and to see the people that it was impacting. And that was really rewarding for me. And so my hope with this show is, this is brand new. And so I really want this show to be a catalyst for giving. My goal is to have it pay for itself, and then to be able to give away most of, what we generate from it in ways that I've done before, and in ways that are very similar to what you've done. Because I think for me, giving and generosity is what it means to be spiritual. And I just can't thank you enough for, giving the inspiration and for sharing and for being part of Spirituality for Skeptics. It's really just such an honor.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for thinking of me.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.